Everyone is vulnerable to being pinned when life plays hardball, whether it is a physical or mental health condition. No one can stand alone. For those who are not pinned, appreciate that it could be you or loved one someday. So when you see a chance to help someone, please do. They are not weak, they are pinned. Even a slight hand up and a listening ear can begin seriously lightening the load, change, or save a life. Help end stigma. Move from being pinned to purpose. Time for a hand up.
Hello, everyone. It's Jeff Moore. I'm the founder of the Pin to Purpose podcast. And it's my great pleasure today to introduce you to Cheryl Bachelor, who I believe is in Brisbane, Australia. Is that correct, Cheryl? Yeah,
coming in from right. Brisbane.
Fantastic. And Cheryl is the founder and the CEO of the Yiliyapinya Indigenous Corporation. And I hope I pronounced that properly, Cheryl.
So, yes, you did.
Great. For those of you who are not familiar with the Pin to Purpose podcast, it's part of a broader initiative to help shatter stigma, give people a hand up on their healing journeys, and have conversations about mental health and well-being. So it's fantastic. And I'd like to read a bit of a bio about Cheryl to begin with, and then I'll pass it over to her for a further introduction. So Cheryl is the founder and CEO of the Yiliyapinya Indigenous Corporation. She's an Aboriginal educator, a researcher, and leader with more than 30 years experience across education, neuroplasticity, trauma-informed practice, and community well-being. She's a nationally recognized for pioneering culturally grounded brain health programs and that translate neuroscience into practical community-led solutions, strengthening early brain development, relational safety, and workforce capability. She's an adjunct professor at Queensland University of Technology, the School of Justice, contributing to research and policy on brain health, healing, and systems change. Contributions include the OECD's Systemic Recovery in 2022, Emerging Minds National Training Program on Brain Development, and leadership of the Shaping Brains Neuroplasticity Program evaluation. She's a regular speaker at national conferences spanning mental health, education, child development, and justice. And her work focuses on integrating Aboriginal cultural knowledge with neuroscience to build brain capital and deliver measurable outcomes for children, families, and communities. And partnerships and co-investment are mobilized to scale evidence-based, Indigenous-led models that create systemic returns, healthier brains, stronger communities, and sustainable growth. So it's really a great privilege to have you as our guest today, Cheryl. You do a lot of incredible things that help a lot of people. And I think we're both also being passionate about the brain and the concept of, brain health and brain skills, brain capital, the brain economy. It's exciting to be engaged in work that prioritizes each individual and their own human dignity, considering we all have a brain and we live with it 24/7 every day of our lives. So Cheryl, enough talking on my side. So I'd like to pass it over to you to say a few more introductory words about yourself, and then we can. Sorry, we got cut off again for a second, but I'll edit that out. But I'd like to pass it over to you, Cheryl, to say a few more introductory words about yourself and your background.
Sure. Thank you very much, Jeff. I'm thrilled to be able to be here to share my learnings and share my experiences, particularly my lived experience with mental health and how it got me to this space here. So I'm an Aboriginal woman from Australia in Brisbane in Queensland, but my mob, my traditional owners and my family come from a place called Kalamala Charleville Space, which is about 12 hours inland from Brisbane. And that's where, from a traditional Aboriginal sense, where my home is, where mob is. But I grew up in a very urban place, but we used to go back home every holidays. I eventually became a teacher and then a principal. And during that time, I got really burnt out, particularly from continually excluding kids and suspending kids from school. And it sort of like drove me to the ground, because I thought we're doing everything that research tells us that we're trying to do to help kids, but we're still missing the mark. So I basically had a breakdown and ended up in hospital for 12 weeks. And during that time, my spirit broke. So from an Aboriginal perspective, we talk about our spirit being sick. And if our spirit is sick, it means the land and our environment around us is sick. So I was spiritually unwell, and I took nearly 2 years to recover. And during that time of recovery, I had to get connected back to my spirit, and being connected back to spirit meant going back to country. So that means back to trees, back to the rivers, back to the oceans, and just being. So not so much letting go, but actually just sitting with the burnout, sitting with the helplessness that I felt because I wasn't able to help kids and help the school, and feeling like that sense of failure, actually allowing myself to feel it, to heal it. So, and that meant that on that journey, I was very fortunate enough to meet someone who actually wasn't a mental health professional at all, but it was someone who said to me, use your intelligence to get yourself through this. And I didn't understand what that meant at that time, but that person started talking to me about brains, talking about brain development, talking about neuroplasticity, and just completely reframed the conversation from talking about cognitive behavior therapy and all those sorts of mental health sort of like words that go with mental health, to saying your brain is so deadly, which means really awesome in Australia. Your brain is so good. You have the power to do something about this, Cheryl. Your brain is sick. It needs you to come in and give it reassurances and guide it and understand it. So I went on a journey to learn about my brain. And during that understanding about brain development and learning about brains, I was able to heal myself through that process. And it's through that lived experience then that I did a couple of things, left education, went on a journey in a not-for-profit organisation to integrate brains and trauma and understand all that. And eventually I thought, actually, the traditional ways of not-for-profits and government systems don't look at spirituality as part of healing. And so when I said before, spirituality for us, mob, is connecting to country and connecting to the world and connecting to consciousness and all those things. It's not necessarily a religion, even though it could be, but that's something, it's sort of like that purpose stuff, something bigger than yourself that you need to connect to, that really, that on that quantum physics level, energy to energy level. So that's when I started Yiliyapinya up in 2019. And Yiliyapinya means brain. And that's the word from mob. Yes. And this is my little brain here.
Wonderful.
It's a bit of an abstract of my brain, but it's broken. I don't know if you can see, but it's actually dashes.
Yeah. Yes.
And it just means that we have a time where things are okay, and then it falls down for a while, and that's okay. Yes. But we get back up and we keep going along to the next dash, and
Beautiful.
but it's still got a brain there that we need to be spiritual connected to and everything. So what we do in Yiliyapinya is actually use that model of improving brain health. So we sort of like flip it from that conversation of mental health to say our brains are super duper good and we need to understand it and we need to heal it, because it's always going to get upset. No matter what happens in our life, it's always going to be happy one moment and not happy the next moment. And we need to be compassionate to our brains and compassionate to other people's brains as well, because we don't know where that brain is and what it's doing to help that body survive. And then we And then we improve cognition, because once you've gone on a healing journey, the impact of that is your cognition not being as sharp and smart as it used to be. So for things like your memory, your processing speed, your inhibition control, what's called social cognition, you being able to get along with other people, that's been, I suppose, not damaged, but it's been weakened when something happens. So we need to improve that. And if you do those two things, we've been able to get kids back to school that are in prison, being able to heal the brain. So that's what we're on about.
Oh, it's incredible. There's so many questions and things I'd love to discuss with you on that. And I also want to start with the fact that, thank you for your openness and sharing and everything you've turned it into. I'm proud to be another person again who ended up in the hospital, and I was there for 5 weeks. And as you know, and I assume, and I'm sure it's the same in Australia as it is in Canada, I mean, these wards are full all the time. There's not enough support. And so this was 2012 for me. It's now 2026, but I'm sure in the past 14 years, it's been full all the time. And interestingly, on my side, I mean, among the people, like the ward was named after a girl I went to primary school with because she was bipolar, and her dad donated a lot of money. On the ward, I was very involved in student politics in college. And on the ward were two of my friends. One was working on the ward, and another was somebody I knew from college who was schizophrenic. So, I mean, the reason I say all this is because in the work that you do, that I do, that so many others do, trying to come back to our common humanity, like obviously there's a lot of suffering out there. There's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of times when people get really pinned, as I would call it, and there's a million other ways to call it. And so I'm glad to have these types of conversations, and I appreciate, you being open and turning it into everything that you've done for other people and will continue to do. So I'd like to ask a lot more questions, but getting into, your own recovery, and then a bit more about that journey as you went along, and transforming and sharpening your views on how you could help others.
Yeah, so the journey involved stones. So I went out on country and sat on the river. And this is when, my psychiatrist, by that time I had 2 psychiatrists, and I was diagnosed with everything, schizophrenia, bipolar, and all that. But it wasn't any of those things. It was a sick brain. My brain just had enough. It was just saying, I can't do this anymore, Cheryl. So it just went into shutdown. So as I said, my doctor said, use your intelligence. So I thought, okay. And he used the analogy of of a house, but that didn't make sense to me from an Indigenous perspective. So I went out on country and just sat by the river and looked at rocks and made a house from rocks, and just went, okay, what is it going to take for the next 5 minutes to get through the day? What does that rock look like? What does the next hour look like? Like when you're so unwell like that, it's moment by moment. Hour by hour. Can I get through the next hour? Like, it's just so draining on the body. And the one thing that needs to happen is we need to be outside. We need to be connected to something bigger than ourselves. Because when we're stuck in the hospital and we're in these 4 walls and it's so noisy, it's neurologically not the best place to heal. When it's so noisy and beeps are going off and this is going off, and you actually need, you just need to get back to feeling the wind and feeling that. So being outside was really the first part of my journey.
I wanted to make an observation, because when you're speaking about building, houses out of rocks, or building things out of rocks, I think of, the Inuit in Canada with their inuksuks, which are guideposts, right? They're making these guideposts out of rocks that are often beautiful, and I want to do it justice, and I may not, but I'm just trying to tell this story. But they're beautiful, almost replicas of people, I think. But you can see from afar in barren tundra that you wouldn't have any other landmarks, right? And they're using the rocks as a guidepost. So I'm always thinking about you were building something as a bit of a guidepost to healing in some ways. So that's interesting. So how long ago did you found Yiliyapinya?
Yep,
Yeah.
2019. So I started off just with myself, and I now have 15 people
Wow.
that work as our team to focus on, as I said, really getting this message out there that our brain is plastic and it can heal and it can improve. But our traditional ways of the medical way is helpful to a certain point. But we need to come back to, as you say, that, pin to purpose, that coming back to that purpose for whatever is in here for you. And for being an Aboriginal person, that was really about land. But other people could be just connected to, a religion or something bigger than yourself to connect to.
Yes.
And that's really, really scary. It's very, very scary to let yourself be and feel what you have to feel to get yourself through this.
And sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you're in hospital, they take that away with your medication. So the medication actually numbs your bottles, numbs your brain in a way that can allow you to speak. And hopefully that speaking can actually help release some of what needs to be released. But ultimately, in the end, the true healing comes from not being numb, but from feeling.
My doctors were recommending that I take medication for a very extended period of time, and then, maybe not get off it. And for me, it was important to get off it and to try to get that feeling back with the support of others, which was tremendous. And it comes back to, I have the number 2 in pinned to purpose, just meaning, you can't go it alone, and you don't need to go it alone. Ultimately, it can be very private and you don't need to tell the world, but you need to tell somebody trusting to get help. And the bench press analogy is the same. I was speaking to somebody earlier today who works in a lot of suicide prevention, with organizations. And, if you have the strongest man in Australia doing this exercise, when the 45 pounds can no longer get off their chest, if they have a 10-year-old son or daughter, that's all they need, because it's still a light thing, but it's crushing at that point. So I wanted to ask you about that, the not going it alone, and eventually being, trying to get rid of any consideration of shame or stigma, and realize, that you deserve to have help on your healing journey.
That was a really tricky one, because working, I was a principal of a school at a very, high level. You had all these kids and you had all these teachers and, all that sort of looked up to you, where's Cheryl? Why isn't she coping with this? What's going on here? So it was extremely shameful. So I was very, look, I have to say, if my husband wasn't there to support me, I don't know where I'd be. But let me just sort of add this sort of other complexity to this, is that my family, my mother, my brother, my sisters, and everyone, and everything like that, because I had broken down being this Aboriginal woman that was the center of the world around that part of my family. Because I got on well, they didn't understand what happened to me, and I had to actually cut ties with them for me to heal. So the key people that actually needed to get through this had to actually leave my life. So
Sure.
Even to this day, which is something like 22 years later, I still don't talk to my mum and dad, my sisters and my brothers, my aunties, my uncles. All that side of my family had to go. And sort of and the reason why is because that rupture, in a sense, needed to happen. And for me, in my head, I just went, put it on pause, because I needed to have some space away from them.
Of course, absolutely.
So I could move forward.
Absolutely.
But as I said, 20 years later, I still haven't gone back there. So it's really important to find the people
Yes.
that are going to support you may not necessarily be your immediate family.
Yes. Hugely important points, and I'm sorry about that in terms of the pain I'm sure it has caused, etc. I just want to give one more observation on that, because interestingly, I had, when my business was becoming more and more difficult to sustain, and then I had undiagnosed sleep apnea severe, so I didn't have any regular sleep, so I didn't know why I was foggy at different times. But a business partner that I had, it was very problematic at the time. 13 years later, when I started Pin to Purpose, reached out for the first time and kind of and said he didn't know what I was going through and he's sorry. And he reached out 13 years later. So I only say that because I hope that Pin to Purpose and many other people's initiatives and what you're doing create some understanding. The bench press analogy, if people realize that you are an incredible leader, but you're also human, so you could only take so much. And so it's not a question of being weak, but it is, you could be in a weakened state, as anybody can. So again, I just share that with you because for 13 years I would have had a huge problem with this person, but I was grateful that they reached out and we went for coffee and gave each other a hug as grown men. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you, and I think your advice is very important for people because each person is unique and each person has to find the right combination to be able to heal of their circumstances. I'd like to ask you
Absolutely.
to... Sorry, go ahead.
And it's okay if that's not your immediate family.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, and it's okay if it's not your immediate family members.
Very good. Oh, very good. Absolutely. So I'd like to ask you to share more. Again, anything else you'd like to share about Yiliyapinya, and also if people want to reach out to you to get engaged in your work for Yiliyapinya and your team.
Sure. Just so Yiliyapinya, as I said, is about brain health and healing, and it's about understanding our brains that have the capacity to heal. But just before I talk about Yiliyapinya, do you mind if I sort of talk just a little bit more about vulnerability?
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah. So what you talked about then, Jeff, about meeting your mate after those couple of years was just absolutely beautiful. And I wonder if that's because of the adult brain development got to that stage of vulnerability. And it's one of those things that we're looking at in Yiliyapinya when we're doing, we are doing some research and evaluation, but when does the brain go through its stages where it's ready to be vulnerable and to be able to say what it needs to say and to feel, to let go, let the body go and feel what it needs to feel. And that's a bit of a process. And it some people sort of say, the research says that needs to be done around people. I totally 100% agree, but I think my journey was around the environment, the birds, listening to the birds, having the dog come up and give me a cuddle, having the being in the water. So sometimes healing needs to happen at a ground level with the environment, with the animals and earth and all those sorts of things before it can happen with a human.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so I just wanted to sort of mention that because that sort of is part of Yiliyapinya. That healing part, that first part is we still do our traditional things. We still have people seeing psychiatrists and psychologists, but to be quite honest, they can only take you to here. And then there's these other things that need to happen to move you to here. And those are the things that society doesn't put a value on. And that's why I love the brain capital, because it's actually recognizing that brain health is more than just, the health system. It's all these other bits and pieces. So we're doing a randomized control trial over the next 2 years on what we're doing with Yiliyapinya in this model of brain health and healing. So we can show that when you don't just do this, but you add all these bits on, and we're still learning what those bits are for different people, then it looks like this. And that's when you get kids back to school, kids not going to prison anymore, parents being loving and caring to their children because they've actually healed themselves from their trauma back here. And now they've been able to be better parents for their children. It's about, teachers turning up to schooling feeling better that they can cope with the diversity in their classrooms. So that's what we're trying to do in the research, and we'll actually produce academic papers on that. But really what I'm sort of like saying is that the brain is on a life course. And so it's, preconception, we talk about testosterone being okay and estrogen being okay, and right at playgroups. We have playgroups that teach parents about brain development. And so that teach parents about brain development, not only for their children's brain, but for their own brain, because adults'
Beautiful.
brain change after 30. So we need
Right.
to do that. And then 7 to 17-year-olds is focusing on kids not going to school, in child safety, and in youth detention. So we wrote a curriculum about understanding your brain and teach kids about that in detention. And then we have workforce training. So we do lots of workforce training around Australia so that we can help adults understand their brain and how their brain under stress is impacting their decisions in their workplace. So what you've been talking about, what happened with you, Jeff, we want to get that conversation now happening in workplace to saying, it's not so much, are you okay? Because most of us go, yeah, I'm fine. It's more about, do I understand where my brain is today? So we do brain health screening. And brain health screening is moments in time of snapshot of your cognition, not of your feelings. And this is really important because the cognition is the indicator. My working memory is not doing well. My processing speed, my inhibition control is erratic. All those sorts of things are the indicators that give you evidence to yourself that you're under stress.
That's incredible. And you're based in Australia, but are you doing any collaborations internationally or promoting this with different groups internationally, or how is that for you?
Yeah, there's two things that we're doing. One is at Alberta Family Wellness Centre in Alberta, Canada. So I've been over there. Yeah, I've been over there not last year, the year before, and presented, and we're looking at going back there again this year. So it's looking at what they know from child development about brains. But as I said before, is that we can't just focus on children. We have to focus on the adult brain that interacts with the child. So that's where we come in and say, actually, this is the adult brain. What does that do to interact with the child? And we need to think about those two things together. It's just like in the workplace. We can't just talk about key performance indicators and all those sorts of things if we're not going to talk about, is my cognition at a good place to be able to do what I need to do? So we need to have those sorts of conversations. And the other thing that we're hooking up with is we're very passionate about sport over here in Australia. And the biggest one is, the biggest one is football. And so when we say football, I'm talking about rugby league. So we have rugby league and AFL, and we have soccer.
I used to play rugby. I played 4 years of rugby.
Oh, rugby league or rugby union?
Actually, yeah, I have to remember the difference because we don't call it that over here. So we were 15s, and but remind me, what is the rugby for you is, and I should know this because I told you I have my daughter who lived in Australia, brought her boyfriend home from Australia. They talk about it all the time. They were supposed to bring me a jersey, and but anyway, I'm forgetting. I played rugby here and 15s, and I don't remember which is which. So.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. There's different categories, and so here in Queensland we tend to do rugby league. So rugby league, we have and ask your daughter's partner if he knows about the state of origin, which is Queensland versus New South Wales. It's pretty full on, and but concussion is a thing. Concussion is a thing. And so there's lots of things we've had CTE as a thing from repeated concussion, domestic violence of women getting hit and men getting hit from each other's relationships and concussion is an outcome of that. So concussion is a thing that is the outcome of, repeated hits to the brain. It can actually be just from falling over, you can get concussion, and there's bruising on the brain and bleeding on the brain. So in regards to football, it's our passion. We don't want football going away because it's very important for our social cognition to, go to a football game and cheer on our team and things like that. But we have to address this concussion. It's like the elephant in the room. So one of the things we're working with at the moment is having conversations with the Football League over here and say, okay, how can we get a brain healthy conversation around concussion?
That's great.
In the football year. So one of our team members is a ex-professional football player, and he's actually going over to Los Angeles soon and taking a women's team over there to work with the First Nations team in, I think they're coming, it's First Nations team from Australia going there, and it's First Nations team that's meeting in Los Angeles at the end of this month. So I'm assuming, I haven't had a good yarn with him, that there's women coming from Canada and other places of First Nations coming together there. So we're looking at linking up there. They're the two places that we're doing at the moment. Oh, and I suppose one other place is New Zealand, our sister city next door.
Well, a couple more quick thoughts, and I congratulate you on that. That's so important. I mean, I've had concussions, and I had one in rugby, and on my website for Pin to Purpose, there's a story. Basically, my story about all this also was in Concussion Legacy Foundation's website. So, I've seen it, I've felt it. I felt like when I got out of the hospital for a while on medication and otherwise, I felt like my mind was concussed, that I wasn't clear at all. And I also, on a more exciting side note, I got to go to see the Canadian women play the US in the fall before they went over to England for the World Cup and almost made it. So I think it's a wonderful sport, but such important work you're doing because, concussions and CTE, and they do a lot of work now, with the donated brains, obviously, to understand things more. And there's a lot of people pledging their brains, which is quite a thing. So I wanted to dig in a little bit more too, when you're talking about you're an Aboriginal woman, you work with these communities, lessons that we can learn. And when I say we, I'm saying because I'm not Aboriginal, right? I have many First Nations friends and different people here that I learn from and I consider friends. But if there are other aspects of that you want to share more broadly on healing journeys or views that help us to, lead fulfilling lives or to deal with a challenging, mental health situations.
I think there's two things. There's a lot of, the buzzword at the moment in Australia is co-design. So you go with a community and you co-design something together for that community. But ultimately, that co-design process, I have found from my experiences, is usually a couple of key people in the community, and that's not co-design. So what we tend to do is do what's called two-way learning, and that is actually have the mindset of, I come with this experience, you come with this lived experience. What do you want to know? And then I've got this knowledge, I can share with you this if you want to know. But for me to help you with that, I'd like you to share something from here.
Very nice, very nice.
There we can come together. So because too many times co-design comes from a position of power. Like, I've got this and I'm going to run the workshop and you're going to tell me everything about your life and we're going to rip you bare about that. And then we're going to produce something and give it back to you for your approval. Mm. And that's not it's ripping the rights out of, well, I think it's human rights. It's a human rights issue because I don't want someone coming into my house to ask me 1,000 questions about my family. But that's what we tend to do from a helping perspective. Sometimes we come in and just go, right, tell me this, and this, and this. And then we have the power to come in and say, well, my knowledge is more powerful. You need to do it this way. Mm. So the learnings from community is to go out there and sit and be and share and conversations, and it can't just be a swoop in to do a couple of workshops and swoop out. It actually You need to be present. So what we do, and you have to go back multiple times. Like, you have to form deep relationships with people to share what they want to share. So, you know, the cost of, in Australia, we have this thing going on about called cultural IP. It means that I've got cultural knowledge that you want, because you want that cultural knowledge so you can get a tender, you can get a government project. You know, that's sort of like where we're at the moment, and that's really unhealthy. It's more about, I've got something, would you like it? And can I give one quick experience?
Of course, absolutely.
I've done I don't like to say work, and I've done. Let me just reframe that. I've had the pleasure of women in the Northern Territory asking me to come along and share what I know about the brain, so that they can go and sort of like learn things, so they can go on to their country and teach other children and their men about brains, because they're trying to address domestic violence, which is another whole topic here. That I wrote a course on domestic violence and neuroplasticity for Queensland Police, but that's another conversation we can talk about later.
Important.
Yeah, so and I'm doing some work with judges and lawyers and drug and alcohol courts, talking about brain development for the judges and the lawyers, about the decisions they make for people that come towards them in the court. And that's that two-way learning that I was talking about. You know, you've got to think about this power bias in what your knowledge base is. So where I'm going with this is that I had a philanthropist ring me up, and we were just talking about things, and she was like saying, "Oh, look, I'm really happy. We've just funded this organisation to give free fridges out to Indigenous communities in the Northern Territory." And I said, "Why did you do that?" And she said, "Because I don't have fridges." And I said, "But do they need them?" And she goes, "Cheryl, of course they do." I said, "Okay, let's just stop and think for a moment. Do they have power?" If you put a fridge, let's just say they do have power, and you put a fridge there, then you're changing their gut microbiome, which is going to affect their brain. And she goes, "What?" And I said, this is a thing when us, sometimes very privileged people, look at a community and think, "Oh my God, you don't have what I have. I'm going to find it and give it to you." We don't think about the effect on their brain health by doing that. And in regards to this was going to, that they were hunting their food, and they knew from generations how long they could keep their food for, how they could hunt. They were passing that on to their children. Their children were healthy. Their brains were healthy. We had 80-year-olds that did cognitive tests, and they were fine. So bringing in a fridge and generators to that community was going to change their lives and their brains. And they hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, well, it's so important. I mean, there's the difference between a blind spot and then willfully ignoring something. So if it's a blind spot and people are open to learning, then obviously you've kind of, the light bulb has been turned on by your conversation, and hopefully they can react accordingly. I wanted to ask you, go back to a question just about stigma in general, and any comments you have about the role it plays to slow down healing journeys, or to add additional weight to people of shame, or, you know, and any thoughts on further eliminating it.
Absolutely. So I think that the words mental and trauma we've been conditioned now to think of them as negatively. And I think we need to reframe that. So there's an institution in Washington called the Reframing Institute. And one of the things that they've done is looking at how we give messages out to influence change and habits that we need to do, and to influence policy decision making. And that's why having conversations with Dr. Harris Eyre really, really early on, back in 2019, actually, probably even back in 2017, when we first had a yarn about this conversation around brain health and brain health economy, is that I needed to flip the conversation, because everyone, oh, Cheryl's had a breakdown. Cheryl's had a breakdown. No, Cheryl's brain was not happy. So Cheryl went on a journey to heal her brain and improve it. So I reframed it. So anytime I heard the word mental health and things like that, I framed, no. What happened to Cheryl was okay. It was actually an awakening. It was actually super duper. It was my superpower moment. And I'm so grateful that it happened, because now I'm stronger, I'm happier, and look what I'm doing. So the essence of a healed brain, neuroplasticity and action. So I think if somebody's gone through something like this, then take that as your superpower moment. It's a superpower moment that others, hey, you haven't had it. I've been through it. I'm pretty deadly because of that now. And whenever if this happens to you, because it probably will, and that's absolutely okay, then come and see me and I'll be happy to support you through it. So I think we just got to take, like, the mental health and trauma, it just weighs us down. So if we flip to brain health, then we've all got a brain, and it's okay when it's not happy.
Yeah, wonderful. It's a very clear message and a great way to reframe again and focus people. I'd like to ask you a bit more about purpose as well. And just to make a couple of comments. I mean, I think people who are in the process of getting pinned, etc., it's harder. You have more tunnel vision. Sometimes your self-talk becomes also part of what's weighing you down. But ultimately, people need those reasons to hang on or survive, or, as you say, sometimes it's moment to moment of just, when you're in a lot of difficulty. But I want to put something out there and then get your comment on that, and anything else you'd like to say about purpose. I have a generally simplistic view that people going through healing journeys ideally should be invited into a volunteer effort in a community, and and brought into that and it's a place-based, so it's local to them, and the UN SDGs have countless issues to deal with, but locally we have those issues in different forms, right? So I mean, when you're in these situations, often you may not even be able to get out of bed, you may not be thinking clearly at all, you may not see any positive future. So it may not be up to you. You may not have the strength at all to reach out to get involved in that. But ideally, to be invited and welcomed, and not just be seen and heard, but be given responsibilities and encouraged to gradually rebuild your confidence and your sense of contribution. I think is in my opinion universal. I think it's a piece of the puzzle. I don't think it is the puzzle, but I just wanted to get your reflections on that, and anything else you wanted to say about purpose and as part of people's healing journeys, and they're part of their connecting and not being alone.
Okay, that's a really good question. So there's a couple of things. When I reflect back on myself, I didn't have a purpose. My purpose was my two children. I had two children, 7 and 9, and the husband. And the purpose for me is, can I get out of bed? Just for self-care for myself. Can I have a shower? Can I it was micro moments like that, okay, can I walk down the end of the street without having a massive panic attack? And so when we sort of start like that, it really comes back to, as I said before, use your intelligence to get yourself through. Okay, Cheryl, I'm just going to take 10 steps, and that means I'm going to have to collapse on the ground and get in a fetal position and cry my head off. Then that's okay. So I think giving yourself permission for your brain and your body to do whatever it needs to do, because sometimes we want to rush to the end. Like, I'm going to quickly get to that 500 meters. Yeah, I've done it. That's it. I'm going to collapse. And it sets you back 2 miles in recovery. But it's really hard when you're a high achiever to pace yourself. Even just to sort of like setting goals, I just don't think you can even set goals at that stage.
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
the goal is just to be
Right.
and to get
Right.
yourself through. So so when you're at the point that you can be curious about yourself, isn't this interesting that I'm having a panic attack about walking down the street, but I've done this so many times before, and just being vulnerable and compassionate to yourself is, but you can't do that if you don't have good cognition and you're stuck on medication that numb your amygdala. So it's a tricky one, but that's when you need someone beside you.
Yes. Yes.
That someone could be a dog or a cat or something else, because as I said before, sometimes people are your trigger. And sometimes just having another person there at certain times is not what you need. But an animal is something that's unconditional love.
Yes.
That can give you that sense of, okay, I feel safe because I've got somebody beside me. So when it comes to volunteering and purpose, I think when you get strong enough, and I don't know if they have it there, but the RSPCA here in Australia, and the reason why I start with animals, it comes back to that spiritual resilience that I talked about before, is sometimes the volunteering could be gardening. It could be taking care of animals.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I usually find, and horses, like equine therapy is so good. So those sorts of things could be for some people volunteering because there's no one around, limited people contact, but I still have to stretch my brain, stretch my plasticity of my brain to do things that I might not normally have to do. So so that comes with responsibility. So I think that there's different stages that you can go through of that to build up to people.
Sure. Right. No, I think I hear you and I agree. I mean, I just think for me as an example and what I have seen and heard and talking to people, you know, in the hospital, I was in no position to be, I mean, the doctor was saying, forget about everyone else, you know, absolutely forget about everyone else now. You know, this is about you and your healing journey. And, you know, if it's a sunny day outside and I'm in bed and I'm not going to be able to open my eyes, no matter who's coming, then I'm not going anywhere. But once you're out, I think this is the challenge, because I think a lot of people have way too much time on their hands and often are isolated. And they're isolated in part because, yes, they may be on medication. They may be unemployed at that time. They may have a shattered self-identity. And so I think at those times, I believe it's important to call people into a bigger group, because they may not believe they can do it or they have the energy, but they still have 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, although they sleep. And some of that needs to be occupied, not ruminating on their own thoughts or not, you know, thinking about where they were and where they can get back to that. And it's not necessarily what is an ideal outcome, but, you know, people who have been, you know, employed and independent, but then are unemployed and trying to recover.
Absolutely. And the thing is that I remember when I got out of hospital trying to find that group that resonated with me. And I found it really difficult because I don't want to be disrespectful, but I just couldn't find the right group of people that I could have an intelligent conversation with. And so I'm hearing what you're saying, like, you know, where's I suppose the group of CEOs support group versus the, you know, someone that's a teacher support group. But you've got to be careful too that you don't go down the rabbit hole of remunerating in a group that reinforces those neural pathways of deficit. So you have to be in a group of mixed people and mixed abilities and mixed occupations that challenge your brain. Yeah. So peer support is really good as long as it's constructive.
Sure. Because I would say, I'm not trying to say peer support in this case, but just, you know, my parents encouraged myself and my siblings to volunteer in many different communities, whether it's sports, education, with people with various disabilities, etc. So it had nothing to do with my work, but it was just like, so I wasn't looking for peer support in these cases, but I got so much out of just the interaction and contributing to a different cause and meeting wonderful people and appreciating, our differences and our, that we've all been dealt different hands we have to play. But in those situations, it's not looking for support from peers at all. It's just looking for, you're a contributing member. And there's an organization here in Montreal, and I'll have to put it, anyway, I'll have them on a separate podcast, but I think they have 130 chapters around the world, but I went to see them recently, and it's an organization where they people who have had mental health challenges can join, and then they're members for life. And when I go to their kind of clubhouse, they're not going to be sitting around. They're immediately given a task, getting involved in something, getting into a group, go to the kitchen, go to do this. So you're valued, absolutely. And that's the type of thing. It's not a direct peer support. It's like you're on an equal footing with everyone else, and we need your help, and let's go.
Absolutely love it. That's like going to take care of land care, going to clean the oceans, or going to community gardens.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Get yourself in there. People should, in my opinion, should be asked to get in there, because they've got a lot of time on their hands. And I think I experienced it. You've experienced a ton of stuff, and we have to figure out the ways to heal. We've covered a lot of ground, Cheryl, but I wanted to also pass it back to you in case there's other topics you'd like to cover, other things you'd like to say, and also towards the end, any specific message you have to any listeners who may be struggling right now a little bit, giving them a hand up. And obviously I'll put the link to your organization in the, on the YouTube channel, and put your LinkedIn connection there, so people who are inspired to reach out to you, and hats off to you for all you do, can do that. So
thank you. I think there's a couple of things. I think we have to understand our own brains before we can understand others. And it's so our brains go through a journey of life like we do. There's something bigger than ourselves that we're still trying to understand, that consciousness, this quantum physics stuff. So we've still got a lot to learn, but the brain is definitely plastic. So my first thing to people is that when you're going through something like this, is be compassionate to yourself and be really compassionate to your brain, because its job is to keep you alive. And what it's doing at that time is saying you need a rest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's telling you a very clear message is rest. I can't do this anymore. I need you to let me rest. And so be curious to that, take that on board and give it some rest. Like your physical, like a muscle is sore in your leg, your brain is sore and it needs a little rest. And it might need a long rest, and that's okay. So be compassionate to that. Think about when you're with specialists, psychologists, psychiatrists and everything, ask them, can you tell me what is going on in my brain right now? And get them to really explain to you that, what's happened is from that moment forward is that you've got the opportunity to do things differently and get them to understand. It was one of those things that I did ask my doctors to explain, and they didn't explain it very well at all. It was only when I went on a journey to understand it myself. But that was the click moment for me when I understood, that's why I think that way. Oh my goodness, is that what's going on? Okay, now I can do it. Next thing, so a couple of key things. Use your intelligence. Use your intelligence to help you get through this, because that part of you is still there. Second thing is, we need to feel it to heal it. And that's something that we don't like to do. Another one is let it be. So not let it go, but let it be. Because there's some things that will just be with you, and that's who you are. And accepting that part of you is the tricky part, but just let it be and be grateful and be curious that it's there and it's doing its job to keep you alive. And I think in some cases, people's brains mirror your brain, and you mirror other people's brains. And when you understand that, you can understand why you walk into a room and you feel anxious and frustrated and depressed, but you have no idea why, is because all these other brains are going off and your brain is super duper sensitive to that at that time. So it could be, and it might be at that time of healing, that you reduce the amount of people that you see until your brain is strong enough to be around lots of different people with lots of different ideas and lots of different things, because it could actually really drain you. So, but understanding where your brain is will help you understand going, okay, my brain's just not in a place for this at the moment. I need to do something different. So healing the brain is really important. But after that, the second stage is one that we don't tend to do, is improve our cognition. And I can't stress that one enough, because the impact of stress and impact of burnout is our cognitive reserve declines. And if we don't build that back up again, it's like talking about those rocks and the foundations of a tree and the roots of the tree. They sort of like get a bit weak as our brains deal with stress. So we constantly need to water them, sunshine them, and keep them really strong. And for me, that's going back on country, taking care of animals, taking care of the community, gardening, all those sorts of things. But around people, but not many people at the time. So feel free to reach out. It's cheryl.bachelor@yiliyapinya.org.au, or there's an admin that you can contact us on the website. Happy to share, happy to help organisations and people understand that and flip this conversation from mental health and trauma to something really positive. We've got a Queensland trauma strategy here, and I just went, oh no, we need a Queensland brain health strategy, and our brain is super duper awesome. And let's remember that it's doing a really good job, and we need to be pretty compassionate to it.
That's beautiful. Well, thanks so much, Cheryl, for sharing your journey, your healing journey, all that you're doing for people now and will continue to do. And I'm sure lots of people listening will benefit greatly and will reach out to you. So thanks so much for sharing in today's Pin to Purpose podcast.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Jeff.
Great. Take care. Thanks.